The idea is...
They appeared together in public. Jennifer Arcuri made no secret she was a fan.
I am here with the legend behind the Olympics and the man that supports businesses, the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson.
And Boris Johnson seemed willing to support her business.
You like hanging out with us, right?
I do. I'm always happy to hang out at InnoTech.
But did he go too far? Was there a conflict of interests at the heart of the relationship? At the time, he was also in charge of the Met. That's why he's now been referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. The police watchdog will decide whether to launch a criminal investigation. The Greater London Authority is already looking into the claims.
It seems like repeatedly a friend of Boris Johnson was given access to money, access to trade trips abroad, access to opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have been entitled to. And that is misconduct in its clearest form, I think.
Downing Street got a letter from the GLA's monitoring officer yesterday. Addressed to the Prime Minister, it outlined the main allegations. In 2013, London and Partners, the Mayor's promotional agency, gave Jennifer Arcuri's company £10,000 in sponsorship for an event. In 2014, L&P paid InnoTech £1,500 to sponsor another event in Parliament. The same year, Jennifer Arcuri applied to go on a trade mission to Singapore. It was declined. She reapplied via her company Playbox and was successful. In February 2015, she didn't qualify for another trade mission to New York. Again, she was allowed to attend. And then in November, she was rejected for a third trade mission, this time to Israel. Once again, she managed to secure permission to attend. Boris Johnson's trade mission to New York in 2015 was to strengthen economic and cultural ties. It also helped to build up his personal profile. An internal email reveals how Jennifer Arcuri managed to eventually obtain an invite. She's been speaking to Boris and an unnamed senior advisor about her being in New York, and they are both happy, apparently, with that, so we should treat her as simply another member of the London tech community. GLA records show that Jennifer Arcuri paid for her hotels and flights on at least 2 of the trade missions, and no evidence has been found of mayoral involvement in the decision to sponsor her for 2 events. She has denied any wrongdoing. The Prime Minister has repeatedly stressed that everything was done with propriety and in the normal way. One of his ministers says the reasons behind the referral to the police watchdog were purely political.
The Prime Minister is clear that appropriate proprieties were observed and in the normal way. So I believe this is a sort of politically motivated complaint, and really it's a distraction from the very important work that needs to be done in this country to deliver not only just getting Brexit done, but all sorts of other important domestic issues.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Talk of a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister next week has been played down by the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. Speaking at a rally in Chingford, he said his first priority was to stop a no-deal Brexit by ensuring Boris Johnson complied with the so-called Ben Act, which requires him to seek a further delay to Brexit if there's no deal.
This government is collapsing. It's now lost all 7 votes since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, and this Tory government has been defeated over 45 times in Parliament. They don't have a majority, they don't have a programme, they don't have policies, and they don't also have any credibility.
But with growing concern from some that the Prime Minister may find a way around the Ben Act, the SNP is warning a vote of no confidence may be the only option left.
Jane Dodge there. Well, in Manchester now is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, Katie Bors. Thanks for joining us, Katie. I mean, it is quite unbelievable, isn't it? A Conservative Prime Minister going into party conference having been referred to the police watchdog.
Yes, but I think we're currently in a political period where we're having lots of unbelievable things, and it's just one of now several, I suppose, fires that Boris Johnson needs to try and put out or ignore over the next few days as they try and make party conference about showing the Conservatives are ready for a general election if opposition MPs ever grant it.
You talk about fires he has to ignore or put out. He's resolutely denied any impropriety over this particularly, but so far not really had to comment on any of the specifics. That changes now, doesn't it, one assumes?
I think it does, and I think we saw initially when this story came out, Downing Street were in a way almost ignoring it in the sense they weren't responding to many queries, you weren't getting many comments. It took a while for Boris Johnson in a way to acknowledge it. I think that now we're seeing, through this, but also through efforts in Parliament, that he is going to come under much more scrutiny, and you get the sense that he isn't going to be able to avoid answering questions on the issue. I think at conference it's still going to be something he tries to avoid, but I do think it's one of those things where if you look at the situation in the House of Commons too, of a majority of MPs against him, I think expect more urgent questions as well as this inquiry.
And there is talk today, of course, of the prospect of a no confidence vote, possibly as early as next week. Is that likely, do you think?
Well, I think the SNP seem to be the ones who are pushing this idea, and I think there is a political factor here, which is you have a group of opposition MPs and parties who all want a general election, but they want to do it on their terms, and that does change. So I think that Jeremy Corbyn at the moment sounds like he might not necessarily go for that. I think you have all the Conservative MPs gathering here in Manchester, but I think helicopters and cars are on standby in case you do have a vote like this taking place. Ultimately, though, the Conservatives have little say in how the vote goes. It comes down to whether or not the Liberal Democrats are willing to go along with this, Labour and other opposition MPs. And that is about who is supposed to be this caretaker Prime Minister if you bring the government down. The SNP appear open to the idea of Jeremy Corbyn. Joe Swinson does not seem open to that. And I think those former Conservative MPs who've had the whip removed would also find that difficult to back Jeremy Corbyn if that's who's being put forward.
So do you think for that reason Boris Johnson isn't that worried about the possibility of this vote next week?
Well, I think in some ways Boris Johnson would like a confidence vote because, although it's, and again, that shows the strange times we're living in, is a route to get to a general election. But I think there's still disagreement. I mean, the names going around of interim leaders of people like Margaret Becker, I've had suggested to me as someone that they think they might be able to get a majority of MPs to support. So I wouldn't rule it out next week, but I think the group pushing this idea are also quite divided. And for the Conservatives, it's just something out of their control. I was speaking to one cabinet minister about how they have a conference when Parliament is sitting. Are they going to have to go back a lot? And they made the point that it doesn't matter if the Conservatives are in Parliament or not. They can't win votes. They have a working majority in the region of -40. So in a way that they're the side player in all this.
One of the really difficult things, of course, is how Boris Johnson squares the circle on the Brexit position at the moment, constantly saying he'll obey the law, yet still arguing we leave on October the 31st. Now, his very controversial strategist, Dominic Cummings, has been suggesting there may be loopholes to bypass the law. I mean, how do you see that playing out?
Well, I think there's various loophole theories. I don't think anyone is quite sure, and perhaps number 10 even aren't sure. We're told it's only a handful of advisors who know this. But I think that what Dominic Cummings has suggested to colleagues is that, and I think the view in number 10 is that this is probably going to end up back in the courts. Whatever rules they think they have, I don't think is going to be as clear-cut, and they expect there to be a legal battle. So I think we are heading to a situation, if Boris Johnson stays in Downing Street, where we're heading to another important Brexit court case. But ultimately for Boris Johnson and his team, I think it's about trying to show they have done everything possible to not request an extension. So even if you do end up having one, they can say in a general election it wasn't much to do with them.